TCI is brought to you by Spendthrift Farm, home of Malibu Moon, AP Indy's leading son year after year.
Welcome back to TCI, your inside track to the Breeders' Cup. Alongside Joel Cunningham, I'm John Siegel. You know, Joel, now that the pre-entries are out, I thought today we'd look through a couple of divisions and kind of just get some first impressions. Let's start off on Friday, and let's go ahead and start with the distaff because it really jumps off to me here. Only 6 horses entered into this race. Joel, this is a marquee race. You only get 6 in there.
I think you only get 6, John, because it's a power-packed group. So, you know, you look at the top 5 in here, and it's 5 legitimate Grade 1 fillies and mares. Street Girl being the only real outsider in here. We've seen, you know, fillies like Include Me Out retire already this year, you know, sort of fall by the wayside. So to me, you get the 5 best older fillies and mares in training right now, and amongst those are 3 very talented 3-year-olds.
Well, I know we have Royal Delta right now at number 1 on our TCI top 5, but you think the 3-year-old might really give her a run for her money?
You know, I really think the 3-year-olds could contend in here. I mean, you have Beholder, who loves Santa Anita, John. She should be the main speed presence. But it'd be interesting to see if Royal Delta can bounce back in that high cruising speed that sort of she's developed in her older years, as well, being the back-to-back champion. But definitely a Mount Ace, a question mark in my opinion about Beholder, but she loves the track. She's going to take a lot of money. And I also think that the closer's interesting. You want to talk about Horse of the Year honors up for grabs. If Princess of Silmar were to beat this group, depending on, you know, what Wise Dan, Game On Dude, and Great R and some others do, she could be Horse of the Year.
All right, well, let's stay on Friday, and let's talk about the Dirt Mile because we really see, you know, this division shakes out a little bit different than we thought it was going to. I know we had some horses we were wondering, were they going to go in the Classic? Were they going to, you know, go in the Dirt Mile? Looks like it's shaken out kind of the way we thought it would. We see Great R in here with a second preference. Tell me, how do you think this race is sizing up?
Yeah, Great R, it's a second preference. I think if Great R ran in here, he would be one of your favorites, John. Right now, I think your favorite's clearly going to be Verrazano. They've been pointing for this race, you know, after he ran poorly in the Travers. Certainly him cutting back to a 2-turn mile should be right up his alley. But he's a 3-year-old taking on his elders in here. And as you mentioned, the Dirt Mile is always an interesting race because, you know, it's usually a secondary race for horses that just don't quite make it to the Classic. One horse that's interesting to me is Golden Sense. They entered in here, did not pre-enter in the sprint. So they clearly think that 6 furlongs was too short like we speculated. I think Golden Sense at Santa Anita around 2 turns is a big-time player. So right there you got 2 3-year-olds that could dominate this division, Golden Sense and Verrazano.
All right, well, let's move now to Saturday then, Joel, and I'd like to talk about the turf. You know, we see Little Mike back in here as a defending champion. Tell me, how do you think this field is sizing up?
You know, Little Mike, in my opinion, is going to be probably your favorite. And the reason I say that, John, is there's not a lot of European participation this year. You know, we've normally seen, you know, Coolmore and the different factions in Europe bring over some really nice horses because there's $3 million on the line, and 1.5 miles is their discipline. However, we don't see that. I mean, Coolmore may come over with a horse by the name of Magician. He's a 3-year-old. He's not one of their first string by a long shot. I don't think he really would have a shot in here. And really, another horse that could take a lot of money is the Fugue, which is the filly over there, John.
Right.
They may run her for $3 million here instead of running her in the filly and mare turf where she'd be odds on in there. But, you know, looking at the fact that she only has to go up against Americans in here, I think they're pointing her for this race as their first preference, going for the bigger purse. I think she's a little better at 1.25 miles in my opinion, but they're trying at 1.5 miles in here. She has won at that distance, so that makes things interesting, her facing the Americans.
All right, well, since you're talking about Europeans coming over, let's go ahead and talk about the mile because we see Olympic Glory. You know, he ran over the weekend. They're still talking about possibly bringing this horse over and running in this race.
He's doing so well, and he won the Queen Elizabeth II so easily, John, that I do think they're going to bring him. I mean, Richard Hannon said after the race that they're going to seriously consider bringing him. They thought enough to pre-enter him. And what's interesting is I like his stablemate, Toronado, the 3-year-old. Toronado is a late closer that could really give Wise Dan a lot of fits. Depending how the early part of the race sets up. So to me, the mile is a very interesting division. You also have Flotilla, another 3-year-old filly, and she won your Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf last year, so we know she likes Santa Anita. She's going to try her elders and the boys in this race. So an interesting mix of horses, and I like the fact that we're seeing some legitimate speed and pace in the race. I mean, you look at Silver Max, you know, you look at, obviously, there's some legitimate pace shaping up in the mile.
All right, well, let's move now to the Juvenile because we see a lot of horses in here that we thought on our TCI top 5 would be in the race. We're seeing those horses not even enter into this race.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to kind of get some feedback. Tell me, what do you think about this field here?
Yeah, I mean, you get no ride on Curlin, obviously no honor code, no Wired Bryan, and won again against New York Breds, I believe, over the weekend. So it's a wide open group. So I think Havana is going to be by far the big-time favorite in here, probably going to be odds-on in here, John. But he faces 2 very interesting maiden winners from the Bob Baffert barn that you know one of the 2 is probably going to be ready, if not both.
Right.
And that's New Year's Day and Tappet Rich. If anybody didn't see Tappet Rich, his debut win, and it was only a couple weeks ago, and he's going to have to come back and run big on 3 weeks rest. He could be a star tomorrow. So Tappet Rich finally adding some talent to that California 2-year-old crop that we've been sort of knocking, all fall long. It looks like the good ones are finally coming out.
All right, well, you're talking about stars of tomorrow. We got to talk about some stars of today because we see a lot of them in the Breeders' Cup Classic this year. We got 13 horses in here, including all of our top 5 and the first 3 finishers of last year's Breeders' Cup.
Well, you put up $5 million, John. You make it the marquee event of the entire weekend. And boy, did it deliver again with 13 horses. You mentioned a great contentious field. And what I like is the various styles. You have a ton of speed in here, a lot of tactical horses, and a lot of very quality closers in the race. And what's interesting is you mentioned the top 3 finishers from last year. Everybody remembers that thrilling stretch run between Mucho Macho Man, getting at Fort Larned late and what was a great finish there. But your favorite last year, Game On Dude, who broke poorly last year as the favorite, he comes in as razor sharp this year as he was last year. So if he breaks this year, what an awesome race this could turn out to be. Certainly him forwardly placed with Fort Larned, other tactical speed in the race. And to me, the horse that may hold the key is Moreno, simply because he could inject a lot more pace in this race, really set it up for the full field of closers, even over a speed bias track like Santa Anita. If Moreno goes out, challenges Fort Larned early, challenges Game On Dude early, and it gets really contentious, watch out for the closers.
Well, you mentioned those closers. They're in just as good a form as everyone else. I mean, Ron the Greek, you got Will Take Charge. I mean, you really have Flat Out. You really have these horses. They're prime. They're ready to run. They want the $5 million too.
Yeah, absolutely, John. They're class horses. All those horses you mentioned were Grade 1 horses. A lot of them are coming in great form. You mentioned Ron the Greek. I mean, he freaked last time out in the Jockey Club Gold Cup. He did it earlier this year in the Sunshine Millions. Which Ron the Greek's going to show up? Which Flat Out's going to show up? Third last year, a very consistent closer. Will Take Charge, the 3-year-old. I mean, and then you look at some of the stalkers in here. I think Palace Malice is a talent, loves 10 furlongs. And Gradar, coming off a good prep in the Kelso, he becomes interesting if he can handle a mile and a quarter. And then Painter, horse we've always liked, can Painter turn it around?
Right.
Because the spotlight's completely off of him now. Could he finally turn it around?
Well, I'm looking forward to next week. I want to hear who your picks are for all these divisions. Thanks for all your input.
Yep.
Hey, and thank you guys for watching. Obviously, we can't talk about all of the divisions here on the show, so we've created our flip book. If you haven't signed up for that yet, please do so at onefasthorse.com. There's going to be a lot of information going in there leading up to the Breeders' Cup. And make sure you come back next week. We're going to give you who we think the winners will be in this year's Breeders' Cup.
$30,000 are up for grabs thanks to the TwinSpires.com Breeders' Cup Trifectathon. 3 winning trifectas could earn you a share of $30,000. But only when you bet the Breeders' Cup at TwinSpires.com, where players win.